Okay, so I think that should be us good to go. So good morning. Thanks very much for joining us on this not particularly pleasant February morning. So there's a lot of familiar faces, but for anyone that doesn't know me, my name is Claire Sharp. I am Digital Inclusion Development Worker at SDvul. This webinar was supposed to be hosted by myself and my colleague Jason, who has the same job role, but unfortunately Jason's not very well. So instead I've got as wingman helping me out, so I'm not flying totally solo. My colleague Aaron Slater, who's Digital Participation Project Manager at SDvul. So Aaron has very kindly offered to monitor the chat box for me while I'm doing presenting. So I think from the looks of it, people are already doing what I was going to suggest. If you would like to pop in your name, who you work for, and any reason in particular why you're interested in digital inclusion, place-based approach, anything like that, please feel free to do so. And if there's any technical issues throughout this, Aaron as well is going to be our IT advisor. So if my sound drops out or anything bad happens, Aaron's going to take over. Cool. Okay, doke. So as I say, my name's Claire. I work for SDvul. For anyone who doesn't know who SDvul are, we're the Scottish Council for Voluntary Organisations, which basically just means we're the national membership body for the voluntary sector in Scotland, and we basically work to support, promote, develop a confident, sustainable voluntary sector in Scotland. But I suspect the majority of you on this call probably already know that. So we've got quite a lot to get in today on this call as well, because anyone that's looked at anything place-based will know it's a massive, massive topic. So what we'll be covering today, we'll cover what is a place-based approach. So for anyone that doesn't know, hopefully your questions will be answered. We are joined next by the wonderful Diane Webb, who we've been working very closely with on a place-based approach to digital inclusion in Renfrewshire. Diane's going to give us a bit of a real-time what this actually looks like on the ground. She's going to be give us a bit of a case study, and then we're going to give you a brief update on what's next for the places that we're working on, a wee bit about what we've learned so far, and then the offer that we, and by we, Jason and I, have for some of you who it might be relevant to in the future. So we've got quite a bit to get through. We'll batter through all of that, and then we'll have hopefully about 15-20 minutes for questions at the end. So if it suits everyone, I'm not going to stop for questions during this because there is quite a lot to cover. If you want to put your questions in the chat box, what we'll do is we'll go through them at the end, and also at the end if anybody wants to stick a hand up or shout out or whatever the case may be, that's fine. Okie doke. So kicking off with
we don't feel could be attributed to the charity.
Ask someone
and the timing is suspicious. Around the time that Scott Wright got married, we can see a number of transactions in relation to.
Perfect, thanks, Aaron. Okay, so what is a place-based approach? I suspect there'll be a few of you on the call that already know this, but again, just to cover all the bases, the place-based approach, it's been adopted across multiple sectors in Scotland to reduce inequality. So it started through austerity policy. So it's basically to help understand the local context, so down at community level, as well as creating joined up responses and solutions. So we wanted to understand how we could apply that principle to digital inclusion. I think the first time we came across it was in more of a health and social care context, so how people within a communities can access public services, health services, that type of thing. But we're obviously looking at this through a digital inclusion lens. So the key qualities of a place-based approach are quite straightforward. It's person-centred. So as I say, the citizen is at the heart of this approach, and it's looking at what citizens need to get the most out of their communities and the services that they interact with on a daily, weekly, yearly basis. Crucially, it's also about understanding what exists in a community and what's missing. So this is what we mean when it comes to the austerity policy. So as we know, services are really stretched, and even more so, I was going to say after COVID, but I think we all know we're still during. So it's looking at what exists in that community, how you can join those assets up, identify what's missing, and see if you can work together to fill those gaps. So it goes without saying that partnership and collaboration is key, whether that's partnership between local authorities and housing associations, whether it's bringing in health and social care partnerships, using the third sector to join up, as we've seen in, for example, things like Connecting Scotland, where we've had a network of digital champions across the third sector to try and help people online, that kind of thing. It values local knowledge and insight, because the great thing about a place-based approach is, because every place is individual, we need to know exactly what's happening in the place, and having the citizens and the people who work and live in the place telling us what that place is like, what they need, what they want, what's already there is invaluable when trying to work out where the gaps are. And again, key to that person-centred approach is actively engaging local people, because the last thing we want to do is make assumptions about what people say they want without asking them. So that's the kind of the key qualities. So the next thing is, why would we take this approach? And by we, I mean SDvul in this instance. So basically, it's quite an important part of Scottish public policy now. If you Google, if anyone prior to this or previously has Googled place-based approach, you find that there's a lot that comes up, especially on the Scottish Government website. So it's definitely a bit of a hot topic. And SDvul love nothing more than a hot topic. So we've looked at it based on it's quite a powerful way of addressing inequality by understanding how the place impacts opportunities and potential. So for example, with myself and Jason and Darren have all worked previously on the Connecting Scotland project, which, if you're not aware, is a national project to give devices and connectivity and skills to the people of Scotland who might have been digitally excluded and isolated by the pandemic. So a key part of that approach was we worked directly with local authorities and leads within that area to try and identify who the people in the communities were that needed devices and the connectivity, and worked with third sector organisations in the area to help provide those people with skills, because those people knew where the citizens who needed it most were. So that's why place-based, essentially, that they understand who the key people are. So at the moment where we're working mainly in Renfrewshire. As I mentioned, Diane Webb is going to talk more about that in detail, so I am not going to steal her thunder in any way, because there's a lot to be said. At the moment, we're further along in Renfrewshire than really anywhere else. We've started working in Berwickshire, where our kind of beginnings has been bringing together a range of voluntary sector bodies along with housing associations, some public sector, so like the local third sector interface and things like that. And we're at the stage of trying to understand what the problem might be. So what are we trying to solve with a place-based approach to digital inclusion? So we've been looking at things like connectivity. So the reason partly why we've gone Berwickshire and not just Scottish borders the way we have in Renfrewshire, as anyone who lives in that area knows, Scottish borders it's quite complex, it's very spread out. There's a lot of problems in terms of connectivity with it being such a rural area. So it made sense for us to work with a network of people in a smaller area, and then we'll see where it takes us. So as I say, we've been looking at connectivity capacity. So there's been a lot of chat about copper wires. We've also been talking about capacity in terms of digital champions, the funding availability to provide services, especially across areas where we've got issues around things like public transport. We've been looking at coordination, so which one of these organisations does does what, basically. We're trying to avoid competition for funding, that type of thing, and looking at work that's already happening in terms of digital inclusion that's working well to see if it could potentially be replicated. So, for example, some chat around digital hubs and village halls, that type of thing. So in terms of who we're working with, it's been about bringing together key local, voluntary and public sector people to understand what the barriers and the solutions are in the place. So far, kind of each place has had a lead. So I've already mentioned Diane in Renfrewshire. In Berwickshire, we're working with lovely Juliana, who is not with us this morning, but has been really influential in getting this work off the ground. And what we've found is that's really been key, is the strong collaboration with that lead that's enabled us to start to bring the range of organisations together that we have to try and get those relationships and partnerships working. So far what we've found benefit-wise, we'll touch more on the lessons that we've learned later in this webinar, but just very briefly, what we've found is that so far joined up working, it offers more comprehensive support. It's a bit more holistic. We're thinking more about how do we do more with less, which I think anybody that works in this type of industry knows we're a bit stretched and we have to make the most of what's out there. And we're also thinking more about having a better user journey. So we target the specific issues in the place that affects the citizens directly. And as well, for anyone working specifically in digital inclusion like myself, we know that digital is embedded across most services now that we access on a day-to-day basis, whether it's near me, it's using energy comparison sites, it's online banking, all these types of things. We know that digital isn't for everyone, and there's always going to be people who will never be online. That's always going to be true to some degree. However, what we're trying to do is thinking about it from a citizen community view, is thinking about using the place-based approach to harness digital to improve the services, so that the people who are accessing services online are empowered to make the most of them, so that it frees up the service a bit more to give that maybe that face-to-face approach for the people that we know are always going to resist, basically in a nutshell. And we also hope it will free up resource and capacity a bit to offer more to those that need that bit more help, is the idea. So thinking about the process, basically the way we do this is we follow the Scottish approach to service design. Again, I'm sure most of you have seen this before, but if you haven't, it's basically that that double diamond there is our kind of our holy grail. So we basically work through those 4 phases. So for example, at the moment in Berwickshire, we've probably moved from discovery into define, because we're now thinking about what's the problem. We've done a bit of research and we're now thinking, okay, so what are we trying to solve? Renfrewshire, we're maybe, and Diane will be thinking, are we? We're maybe at the touching develop stage, so we've got quite a bit going on. And as I say, I won't steal her thunder, I'll let her talk about that a bit more. So we've been thinking about the process we've been following as well as this is thinking, what's the problem? What do we need? Sorry, who do we need? So getting the right people around the table, which I've touched on around the importance of having the right people in the room, that the importance of collaboration, strong partnerships, having a lead. And now we're trying to look at finding a solution depending on what that problem might be that we've taken some time to discover. And then we'll be looking at piloting the work. So in this role ourselves, we've been acting as a critical friend, rather than it's not SDvul as are a national charity, so we're not frontline workers. So basically we are in the role as a critical friend to support the places to try and drive the work forward and support our leads to make this work sustainable. And Diane, again, is going to explain a wee bit more about what we've done, so we don't blow our own trumpets too much. And as well as thinking about what the problem is, we also bring together a range of stakeholders that are all engaged in digital inclusion work, and as the main part of that is to try and understand what the barriers are for people and services, and it helps us build a picture of the place. So from there we were able to understand where the potential solutions might be, and we continually ask who needs to be here as well. That's a question that even just yesterday in a Renfrewshire meeting we were still asking. We've got a great group of people around the table, but we're still saying, are we missing anyone? Is there anyone that needs to be here, particularly around people that are maybe coming from excluded groups? And one of the other bits that we are starting to use is co-production groups, because this is such a huge approach. Basically what we're trying to do is, if there's a specific problem that maybe needs a wee bit more time spent on it, we're doing smaller co-production groups so that it's kind of freelanced out, I suppose maybe would be the way to explain it, and using things like how might we statements that we're hoping to use in focus groups to speak to digital champions, citizens who live in the place, to work out how might we make services better. And hopefully this will kind of lead us to work towards a solution that involves everyone. So basically ensuring that everyone's got a role to play, and we're delivering something that's sustainable and workable in response to digital inclusion. And then the ideas are generated, supported, and hopefully long-term managed by the place, is the idea in theory. So this is what we're trying. So rather than me hypothesizing anymore, what I'll do is I am going to stop sharing and invite Diane to tell you a wee bit more about what we're doing in Renfrewshire.
Great, thank you. Thanks. I'm just going to share my screen here for you. Okay, so good morning, everybody. Thanks, Claire. It's great to be here and to have the opportunity to share our experiences with you so far. As Claire said, I'm Diane Webb. I'm the digital policy lead for digital strategy at Renfrewshire Council. And today I'm just going to take you through our story so far. So looking at a bit of the background, how we got here, the opportunity to partner with SDvul, how we went about setting up Citizen Voice and what that is, the role that SDvul have played, and what we have achieved. So just a bit of background around ourselves and Renfrewshire Council. I feel very fortunate to be in my role. Renfrewshire Council have been really supportive and forward-thinking in their approach to digital inclusion. And previously I had worked for a charity called Quarriers, where I have seen firsthand the power of technology to change people's lives, and that's changing lives for disabled people. From even knowing that the internet existed, from sending an email, their very first email, right over to someone being able to use technology to give them a voice when they physically might not have a voice. So for me, that's my passion around this, and technology being something that can do good. But it's since then that you'll probably all know that we all know that the people most likely to benefit most from being online and getting access to technology are those most likely to be digitally excluded. And that's why we're here. I imagine that's why I'm here, to try and close the digital divide and use that technology for good. So the opportunity, yeah.
I think we might need to change your view just slightly.
Oh, sorry. All right, okay. Is it? Let me see. Do you know how I change it at all?
If you click on to see, I think if you go to present current slide on, if you go down onto PowerPoint.
Just back into the PowerPoint, yeah, or is it not?
There we go. If you go slideshow and present. Maybe if you go up the top, next to animations, next along to, yeah, right hand side slideshow.
Smaller. Was it playing at all? No.
It was, but we could see it was mostly your notes. If not, we can just do.
Sorry to interrupt, guys. Diane, have you got two screens? Are you working?
Did have that switched off actually. That's maybe what it is.
I think it's because we're seeing what should be presenter screen rather than.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, that's it now.
That's it. Right. Thank you. The power of technology and peer support right there. So I think I've just finished off, was the opportunity, to work with SDvul. It just came at a really good time for us, because it was when Renfrewshire Council had refreshed its digital strategy. And within our previous digital strategy, digital inclusion has always featured, and it was no different this time. So we have a work stream called Digital Citizen, which is the one that I lead on, which is around digital inclusion. And just as we were planning around that, we were looking at how do we reach out to people and understand the need out with the council. So we're really lucky that we have a strong foundation to build on from that, and that we have a network called Diane, which has been running for 6 years. It's co-chaired by myself and the chief exec of our third sector interface Engage, that's Alan McNiven. And that is made up of public and third sector, private sector, housing associations as well, that come together and share their expertise and learning and provide that peer support. So that's been running for 6 years. So that gave us that strong foundation to build on in order to reach out to the community, to organisations that are working in the front line to try and understand the issues around digital inclusion. So just as we were planning that, SDvul luckily got in touch to offer the opportunity to develop a place-based approach with them. So it was really exciting and great timing. The stars just aligned. And we, in my own experience, I do believe that a place-based approach works best. And I think it's all about relationships, and we need to meet people where they are. So this chimed well with the approach that we were taking. So the next thing we did then with SDvul is that we decided to take the model of Diane and build from that and create a separate group called Citizen Voice, but using the same sort of approach with Diane. But this group would have a focused task over a certain time period and a certain commitment. So for things, for example, we asked that we expected people to attend meetings every 6 weeks, and also to take part in activities and tasks in between meetings. And we were lucky that we were able to do a call out for support across Diane, and we got a lot of interest very quickly. So we weren't starting from ground zero, really. Citizen Voice is made up of public, private and third sector organisations, and it's all people that are passionate about making a difference and contributing to digital inclusion and supporting people to get online. It's chaired by myself, but supported heavily by SDvul, which makes a real difference. We plan the sessions together, and we just had a session yesterday that took a lot of planning but went really well, because we understand that people only have limited time to meet. So we want to make the most of that time that we're meeting people, and we only bring them together when we need to. We always ask, one of the things I think Claire mentioned is we always say who's missing, because we want to make sure we've got that broad sector so that we're getting that broad range of opinion right across Renfrewshire. The aims of Citizen Voice are to identify together the local challenges, the successes and the priorities for our local area. And it's different wherever you go. And then from that, we co-design and co-deliver the solutions. So the role of SDvul, first of all and foremost, it's really around that peer support. I'm really lucky that I have not only one but two SDvul digital inclusion development officers in Jason and Claire. And sadly, just a shout out to Jason, who can't be here today. I hope you're feeling better. What this relationship does is that we met, it was eight months ago that we first met, and it's over this period that we've built up a strong relationship of trust and understanding, which has been really important. And from that, we've almost created, I would describe it as a hybrid team. So it's like Renfrewshire Council working within SDvul, working together. But that gives us a real power, because I can reach back into my colleagues and my team and bring that back into the hybrid team with SDvul. They can also do the same. They can reach in to that expertise, that wide expertise and rich experience within the digital participation team. And it's on hand support. So important. Working with SDvul gives me that safe space just to have those honest conversations about issues or to share ideas, because you need to have a safe space in order to develop ideas and try things out, and that's what this gives me. And they take on that role of critical friend. So in that, we're able to not just agree with each other, that we need to be honest and see if something will work. If we think it won't work, is there a way that we can test it out? For example, taking it back to Citizen Voice to get their feedback. The other thing that's been great that SDvul have done is the workshop facilitation. So even though I'm chairing the sessions, it's been really important for me to be able to, at points during our sessions with Citizen Voice, to sit back and just take that time to truly listen to what our partners are saying. Because sometimes when you're trying to chair and organise, it's difficult to do that. So there's some parts of the session where Claire and Jason will facilitate it, using things like Miro, Jamboard, using some digital tools to try and elicit responses from the group. That doesn't always rely on a verbal put your hand up response. We actually can record it digitally as well, and make sure that we're hearing all the voices across the group, including the quieter ones. The other thing that they have taken on is that they will quickly create surveys, get them out to the group. We'll either do live Menti surveys during our sessions, or they might send them out in between meetings just to check back in or ask specific questions. The other big piece of work that Jason actually did was around an analysis of our understanding of what the issues were and what's the problem that we're trying to solve. So it was really good that he was able to take that away, put that analysis together, and then we were able to feedback on it. We then presented it back to the group to check in, is this what you said? And then finally, the evaluation. So even this webinar today, the interim report that they've pulled together, I'm able to use that to inform plans and make the case for digital inclusion within the council. And just finally, there is that rich knowledge base and expertise that exists within SDvul, as you know, even through the work with Connecting Scotland with lots of organisations across the years. They have got that knowledge base and expertise that I feel that I've got that easy access to, which makes a huge difference. And to me, that feels like we're a collective force for digital inclusion. So finally, just to finish off, just to say a little bit about what we've achieved over the 8 months, and that includes a summer and a Christmas. So although it feels like it's been a very, very quick 8 months, I feel like we have achieved a lot. So we've set up Citizen Voice. It's a really healthy membership within the group. We've met 5 times now across this time. We've completed a needs analysis. we've set up a digital inclusion pilot together. We're in the process of creating a business case now to feed back to council and other organisations the case for digital inclusion and what we think works. We've also succeeded in being awarded Renfrewshire Council Social Renewal Plan funding. And this is an example of us, I suppose, being in a position to know what we need. So we were able to use that funding, planning to set up a digital champion network in partnership with libraries. We're really excited about that. There'll be a digital champion coordinator, and it'll be their responsibility to train up volunteers and staff across Renfrewshire to become digital champions. We're also looking to co-design a device recycling pilot. So looking at how people can maintain their equipment or what they can do with equipment they no longer need that might be useful for citizens within Renfrewshire. And finally, we also got funding to produce an external evaluation of our approach, which I think is really important so that we're not marking our own homework and we don't become an echo chamber for the work that we're doing. So we have someone external evaluating everything that we're doing, and then we can learn from and also use to make the case for future investment. So just to say really that thank you to Claire and Jason for all your support, all your passion and your enthusiasm. It's so good to just be in the room with two other people that feel the same as me. Especially within my role within the council, it's just myself taking that forward. So it's been really important for me to just have that support, and really just I don't think we would have came as far as we have without the support of SDvul. And I just want to thank SDvul also for trusting us and giving us the chance to try out this new approach with you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Diane. I think if Jason and I were both here, neither of our heads would fit on the screen at the same time, but thank you very much. It really has. It's been brilliant so far. So hopefully it will continue to have real change, and maybe in a few months' time we'll be doing another one of these webinars to let you know where we've progressed in several, in Renfrewshire and other areas. So just from that then, what I would like to touch on is, excuse me, is basically what's next. So Diane mentioned just there about an interim report. So Jason and I have been beavering away in the background, putting together a bit more information on basically the webinar that we're doing today is the light version of the report. So there's a big, much longer report that goes into all of this in a lot more detail that we will send out to all of you following this report. We will publish it publicly as well, but because you're all here this morning, we'll send it out post webinar and you can have a read. And obviously, once you've read it in more detail and people have got questions or want to have chats, Jason and I will be available for that. So what's next in terms of the actual places themselves? So just touching on the kind of end bit of what Diane said. So both our kind of next steps are continuing to follow that Scottish approach to service design model as well. So we're develop, as I say, is the stage we're at in Renfrewshire. So the next thing will be continuing with our citizen voice meetings to try and put together, the next stage is we're going to try and put together a bit of I suppose a mission statement might be the best way of putting it. We did a session yesterday on what are our kind of aims, our visions, our outcomes, just because it is a very strong partnership. The group, is rooted in collaboration. It felt that we wanted to be really clear on what the purpose of the group is and where it's going. So we'll be putting together a slightly more formal document so that we've got a note of where that's going. As Diane says, we also got some funding that will be so as part of that we'll be looking at the recruitment of someone as a digital champion coordinator across Renfrewshire. So that'll be job descriptions getting written and bits and bobs there. So watch this space on that one. And we'll also be looking at starting the digital inclusion pilot that we're kind of working in partnership with the library service in Johnston. And the final kind of bits and bobs are, we'll be looking at the co-production groups. So the main things that we've got in Renfrewshire are, we'll be looking at linking in with local authorities, housing associations, third sector groups who have digital champions, either employed or volunteering within those organisations, to do some focus groups to find out what the frontline staff feel they need, what they would like, what citizens are saying, and we'll probably do some work with citizens in the next few months. We'll be doing those next, and we've also looked to recruit some volunteers for a co-production group about signpost and resource mapping, so like a kind of digital directory type idea. We were really lucky when we initially mentioned that quite a few people already volunteered, and we got an extra couple yesterday at the latest Citizen Voice meeting, so that's where we'll be going next. And Berwickshire, as I say, we're probably a stage behind. We're moving into, I would say, the define phase. Kathleen's on the call, so she can keep me right. We are now looking at the next meeting of the group in the next couple of weeks. We'll be thinking about that who's round the table again, just to make sure if there's anyone we might be missing, let's use our network to reach out to them and get as many people involved who have the expertise that we need. And we'll probably, I think, be thinking about that aims and visions that we touched on in Citizen Voice yesterday. I think it will be more around thinking about where we want to go next. So next steps, a wee bit of an action plan, and what we want to achieve, all going well. So as I say, watch this space on that one. So the next part really here is what we've learned so far by doing this work. As a learning piece of work. So the report that we're going to share with you at the end of the webinar is an interim report. It's the story so far. Very much so, because it's a learning piece of work. We're working towards understanding what works best. So the lessons that we're going to touch on here reflect what we know so far, 8-9 months into the journey, basically. So I think based on what I've said so far, the first step is to say that people are 100% at the heart of this. They're key. So the process, it places people at the centre, and I know we're hearing people say people-centred a lot, but in this case it very much is, because it's going directly to the citizens and the places and asking what do you need. So what we've been trying to do is we've begun to try and understand and evidence that the people are the essential component in driving forward place-based digital inclusion work. As I say, it sounds very obvious, but sometimes it's forgotten, especially when we're all thinking maybe quite high-level bits of work. We have to keep the citizen, the people at the heart of what we do. And we'll be using that service design model, working in an agile way, making sure that we constantly revisit that, so that who's round the table question is something we'll always be going back to. We're also recognising the importance of engaging with people at every stage of the process, to help us build a model that specifically meets the need of the place. So we're constantly sense checking. This isn't our work, it belongs to the community, the citizen, the place, and the work has to be sustainable. So we know the way of doing it is to do that. What's the problem? To build a bespoke solution that's specific to the place, with input from people who know it best, because as we know, certainly, in Scotland, every place is quite different. We've got quite an unusual landscape, and there's a varied needs basically across different places. We've also been thinking about the digital champion model, which a lot of you on this call will be familiar with, that we've always referred to as embedded. So it's the digital champion model that is best delivered through trusted existing relationships, which we know 100% it still works, but it does need slightly adapted now that I keep going to say post-pandemic, but we're really not. So let's say for mid-post, she says, crossing our fingers. Like, so much has changed, and digital really has become the forefront of so many people's conversations. So rather than it being that kind of short, sharp intervention, light touch approach, we're now maybe looking at more of more of a blended approach, so different styles for different people, just thinking again about those people who might need to access services but maybe don't necessarily want to do digital, so we have to include them in some way, but it's never been about forcing people to do digital. It's adapting our style to meet the needs of those who need the support. And as I previously mentioned, we need to try and reach those excluded groups, so people who maybe traditionally haven't been included in some of these models for whatever reason. We also know, and this is probably something anybody that's been involved in Connecting Scotland or anybody that does frontline work or is involved in frontline work in digital inclusion, the people that are making the change, so the digital champions are the heart of this work. We wouldn't be anywhere without digital champions. And I think after 2 years of having to deliver, in a lot of cases, quite intense remote support, when people are having, digital champions themselves are having to pick up maybe a lot of digital skills that they maybe didn't previously have, or they didn't have to the extent that they probably have now, having had no choice but to deliver their support online. We're now looking at trying to recognise and reward them for the work that they do, maybe a wee bit more. So we're looking at a more robust framework around digital champion support, thinking about well-being, burnout, these types of things, because the past 2 years, as we all know, have not been easy. So it's worth keeping in mind. So basically, as a summary of, Diane's touched on a lot of this, because it's the report takes a lot around for sure what we've learned, and I think it will be the case going forward with all the other areas that we hope to work with. It's local passionate people are essential to drive this work forward. We'd be nothing without the people that care, whether it's people that care about specific parts of digital, people that care about the needs of their community, people that are passionate about bringing funding to offer more resource and capacity. Without them, this approach wouldn't work. It would be, be dead in the water straight away. A critical friend's important for all the reasons outlined. It's great to have someone involved who can maybe be that impartial, maybe voice of reason in the back, or potentially bringing people together who traditionally haven't worked together in the past, or sometimes just as I liked what Diane said about marking your own homework. So it's good to have that different perspective sometimes from someone slightly removed from the place. As we've said, meaningful partnership work is crucial. We would be nowhere without partners. This is not the type of approach that works with one single person leading being the leader. It's very much about working well together, and everyone taking responsibility for their actions and also being willing to take action forward. It can't just be one lone person screaming into the ether. It's best, as we've learned, to be iterative, agile, flexible, and responsive. Basically, what that means is if you think you're making a mistake, stop and fix it. So that's what we've learned. We're getting very good at going, don't know if that's right, let's change it. And I think at the heart of things, and based on things we've heard from Connecting Scotland across the digital inclusion landscape, any partners that we already work with, that we're having a bit of a capacity resource issue around digital champions, which is totally understandable considering the way things have been, and there's some potential burnout there. So we have to have the wellbeing and support of our digital champions who are so key to this type of work, to support them as well. So just to kind of go into a wee bit more detail, when we say being local and passionate, local is not necessarily enough. You also need to have the capacity and the willingness to see the work through. So Diane and Juliana and Berwickshire have been absolutely fantastic. Like the levels of enthusiasm, the driving force that they've had to keep the work going has really been key to make, hopefully to keep this work moving and to make it sustainable long term. And as I said, taking that responsibility, creating the actions, driving the action forward is truly important. So that's kind of a very whistle-stop tour of a place-based approach. So part of the reason why we wanted to bring everyone together this morning to discuss this is partly to share knowledge as we always do, but because we would like to try and expand this work. So basically we've got an offer, because we always do. Anyone that comes to an SDvul event usually knows that we've usually got something that we want to put out. So I'll run through this and then we will go to questions. So I'll try and go through this quite quickly. So what we're hoping to do is we'd like to offer this work across Scotland. So basically what we offer is a bespoke, tailored approach to developing a sustainable digital inclusion service in your place. So there isn't a how-to guide about how to do this. It's more about understanding what works best for people in the specific place identified. So when we say place, as I kind of touched on, you know, it doesn't have to be a local authority area. It could be a smaller area within a local authority. It could be an area within a city. It could be a group of organisations who want to do something specific across maybe a couple of smaller areas, so maybe a couple of villages. It could be islands. So it's worth having a think about what is your place, if this was something that you were interested in doing. So if it was something that you are interested in, just thinking, you know, if your mind's starting to whir just now, or ideas are forming, basically what we've got is we've put together an expression of interest form. So it's an opportunity to get involved in this. We've got capacity to be involved with another 2 to 3 places across Scotland. So that's probably realistic, depending on what happens. So the expression of interest form that we have, this will come out as well. So you'll get there'll be a recording of this webinar. There'll be the interim report and the expression of interest form. So what we've done, and the reason why we're doing an expression of interest in this way, is because as we keep saying, and we will continue to say, the partnership and the collaboration aspect of this work is key. So what we would like people to do before just submitting an expression of interest form is to have a chat with potential partners or people in your place that you think we could do something to benefit our place, our community, our local authority, whatever that looks like to you. So we asked to have maybe an initial conversation, so that when Jason and I have a bit of a pre-offer call with you, that we've got a kind of a basic understanding of what you're maybe thinking. We don't expect you to have, you know, all the answers, but just maybe begin those basic conversations, because as we say, it's impossible to do this alone. So that would be our advice to you. So yeah, and it should also, the good thing about the form as well, it'll help us understand where your place is within the journey, how the programme can help. So it gives us a bit of time to think about, okay, what of the work that we've done so far, what would be the best fit, and you can also have a wee think about what that place is. As I say, there's no standard definition, and the communities understand their own needs best. So if it's something that you're interested in, if you complete the form and submit it to us, we'll be in touch to set up a call to talk through how we can help, what specific support we can offer. And that's pretty much it. If anyone wants initial questions on the form, then I can stick them in the chat, but as I say, we'll be sending it out later on as an attachment to everyone who's been on the webinar. So that's me finished with my sales pitch. So what I'm going to do to make it easier for questions, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can see we can kind of see each other. So if people want to, we're still recording, but if you want to pop your camera on to ask a question, stick your hand up or shout out, that's absolutely fine. Okay, so oh, sorry, carry on.
Sorry, Claire, I was just going to say we had a few questions come through in the chat while you were talking. So if you want me just to give you a quick summary. because I see Diane's answered some of them.
Perfect.
Cool. So we started off, I think, with Andrew had a question, which was around kind of a starting point. And Andrew's question was, when determining local challenges, successes, and priorities, do you start from a digital inclusion perspective or start from a broader understanding of the critical issues in communities and then apply a digital inclusion lens? And I know, Diane, that you provided an answer in the chat there, but I just wanted to invite if you have any further comments on that or anything you wanted to add.
Yeah, no, it was just a really good question from Andrew, that it is that balance of both of understanding that the local issues, but also the kind of wider policy. I'm lucky that I work closely with the Tackling Poverty team within Renfrewshire Council, and because I kind of live within policy, but also I sit in ICT. It means I've got that reach right into those teams to check in with them to see what are the local wider issues across communities and what's the priority, what's the direction of travel for us as a council and across the community. So it is always both, yeah, but really good point. Does that answer, Andrew?
Yeah. I noticed as well, Andrew, you'd said about continuously asking who needs to be around the table. So in terms of how successful we've been at engaging local people, for example, our citizen voice work, the answer is we don't know yet. So the plan is we are starting to ask for volunteer digital champions to do focus groups. So that'll be the next step, because I think what we'll then do is we'll ask digital champions if they can talk to their citizens they've supported, just because going back to that trusted relationship. So I think we'll do digital champions first so that we can then, so that they know what to expect to then engage with the citizens. So based on the response we had yesterday asking for those volunteer digital champions, it looks quite promising. So hopefully it'll be the same when we get to the citizen stage. But as I say, it's highly likely that we'll be back on a screen near you, updating you all at some point. So hopefully we'll be able to give you a wee bit more, but that's where we're at with that. Cool. Yeah, I'm
Claire,
just.
can I just ask you, Shona, hi Jen, just clarity on when you talk about the place, you're talking, from what I'm picking up, quite largely about sort of geographical locations there, that sort of area as you spoke about so far. Could the place be, for example, someone's organisation, place of work? So it might be a Scottish-wide charity or organisation and they see their communities as the people they're supporting. Could they apply and the place be their place of work as such, but it's spread across Scotland? Does that make sense, the question?
It does, yeah.
Rather than limiting it to sort of the geographical locations you've spoke about so far.
I think, yeah, there's not a standard definition of place. So it's basically any, so community, and I don't mean community geographically, I just mean a group, like a collective group of people that are able to think about the needs of what that community looks like. So I suppose if it was a nationwide charity working with, let's say, homeless people, for example, they'll know that community and the needs of their community best. However, the only thing, because it's a really good question, Shona, the only thing I would think about is in terms of trying to do that asset mapping that we've had to do. So what services are available to that community? A lot of the time it does come down to geography, but I suppose it would depend on signposting and I think that it would be an interesting discovery thing to do to try and work out.
Yeah, it's just trying to think, like, are we looking specifically at geography, or like I said, there'll be sort of national organisations that might be across Scotland that see their place as their place of work and how that supports the, like you say, the communities that they're best placed to support.
It's a learning process. So to be honest, it would be really interesting to try and see what that looked like. So I don't see any reason why not, to be honest. But it would be interesting to see if it came down to the services and the needs in specific local authority, like local geographical areas rather than overall. But no, it'd be interesting to know.
Yeah.
And then let's see. So Becca, I know what metrics are you using to assess and measure impact at citizen level and services accessed? So I am going to maybe ask Diane to talk slightly about the external evaluation. That maybe makes most sense, if that's
yeah,
okay.
Of course, no. Yeah, that's. I was quickly typing away there. Sorry to answer you, Becca, but yeah, just to say that it's a question that always comes up and is complex. I think that it's a. And I think with myself being the only resource on this just now, one of the things I was lucky enough to do was to try and secure some funding for external evaluations to look at this. Because as you know, you're always asked, I'm being asked just now, what's the measure? How can we prove the benefit to what we're doing? So it's really, really important, because just now the case that I'm making within our digital strategy, within the council and all our council planning, is that digital inclusion has to underpin all of that. Without digital inclusion, you can create a fantastic website, you can deliver services online, but the people that you're trying to reach are probably those people that are most likely to be offline. So that is, adding to making that case, you then need to, as you're quite rightly asking, how do you measure the impact of what we're doing, and is it making that difference? So yeah, I think it's a difficult one, and I think we've spoken about that, Claire, before, but I'm really excited that we'll be able to start looking at that with an external company that are with their expertise in that to start building that framework of evaluation. I think that's probably a question for us all in Scotland, isn't it? And how do we measure? And there's maybe something around that, building that framework of evaluation around digital inclusion for us all, instead of us all each doing it. We can do it collectively.
That's, as you were saying that, I was literally just thinking, we're talking about collaboration and partnership work and sharing expertise. So that's, we might just come back to you, Becca, and say, oh, do you know one? Would you like to help us do one? I'm just checking to see, I'm just scrolling through the chat to see who I've missed. So Gavin, yours is a wee easy one. Yes, what we'll do is we'll share all the bits and bobs because you're on the webinar this morning, but please feel free to circulate it up to senior CLD, that's absolutely fine. Yeah, and anyone else, if you feel like this maybe isn't, this is for my organisation, but I'm maybe not the person, if you want to share the offer, the report, etc., please feel free to do so. That's absolutely fine. Now, I missed anyone. Malcolm, so anecdotal experience has been digital inclusion has broadly fallen into 3 segments: lack of connectivity, hardware, and lack of familiarity, confidence, skills, etc. Does that echo your experiences, and how have you engaged with the broader broadband infrastructure issue, especially in rural areas? Sorry. Yeah, I would say very much so. I think what we're maybe finding is lack of hardware is less of the issue. It's becoming maybe more around the skills and how those skills are taught. So touching on what I'd said about the digital champion support there, so that's probably a key element. And then also lack of connectivity. So the connectivity one is a big question. There's work in Renfrewshire going on, which I'll put a pin in for now, but for example in Berwickshire, the problem that some areas have is, when I mentioned copper wire, basically the problem with copper wire is that no matter how much money you have, it's not possible to get great broadband, and it's something that, to be honest, is probably higher up than any of us on this call, but it's definitely something I think we'd all like to see. So at the moment, how have we engaged? As we're all talking about it, we all agree it needs to be better, it needs to be more available, it needs to be affordable to people across Scotland, but it's a work in progress, very much so at the moment, I think is fair to say. I'm scrolling again to see if I've missed anything. Aaron, keep me right.
We've got a new question in from Jim saying Diane mentioned their digital inclusion pilot and he's asking, what did this involve?
So this was the one that I mentioned in Johnston. Diane, do you want to explain how it kind of came about?
Yeah, so Jim, we we realised that we were coming up, the group was, after the group had identified what the key issues and challenges were and the solutions, we then thought, well, instead of trying to do that right across Renfrewshire, let's start small and create a pilot just to test out some of the approaches and to try and concentrate the effort. So what we spoke to different partners, and we tried to pick a location in Renfrewshire that where there was either a need or that there was a strong number of organisations willing to join the pilot and support it. And from that we picked Johnston within Renfrewshire, where we went back to the group to check in with them that they agreed with our kind of reasoning around it. So then within that, what we're going to do is trying to pilot the creation of the Digital Champion Network, but focusing in within Johnston. So we've had Johnston Library, but we've also identified a local community hub that's just been created by Active Communities called Station 7. We've also got a housing association there. So between the three of those organisations, we're looking to try and deliver that Digital Champion Network support out of those locations. So trying to get libraries to do that outreach work right into those areas. The Active Communities Hub as well, I should just say, it will house other charities as well. So for me, it gives people like an option. They can go to a library for support, or they can go to this neighbourhood hub. So it gives that blended approach. Does that make sense there?
Makes sense to me.
Yeah. Just in following up on some of the comments that were made about digital champion burnout and people struggling to get digital champions. How's that going for you?
Yeah, well, that I think that's one of within libraries we did have a funded service which looked at recruiting digital volunteers. That lost its funding, and it was because we had Citizen Voice and libraries were part of Citizen Voice. We all as a group identified that there was a need. that's why we directed the funding we got to now creating this new role, but we're trying to make it more sustainable. And the thinking about that kind of burnout and recruiting digital champions, there's an overhead on organisations to train up people to become digital champions. So we're trying to take that overhead away. So if it becomes that you know that you go to this digital champion coordinator within libraries, that's the place to go for that training. For example, I think Andrew mentioned Star Project. If they had someone who is a befriender, they might not necessarily see themselves as a digital champion, but they might then recognise, as you know, that you do need digital champion skills within your role. So Star Project wouldn't need to think we need to do that training, they just send them straight to digital champion coordinator. And then the plan is to set up a network so that they can have this peer support, and you build up this knowledge and experience within this network as well. But it still doesn't answer the other thing we're looking to do as well, is trying to make the case for paid digital champions. It shouldn't be something that's an add-on, a voluntary role. It needs to be seen in its own right for what it's doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. Well, good luck. Sounds great.
Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Thanks.
I'll just touch on, there's another couple of questions there, Becky. Your second one around how do you provide support to people without forcing them to accept like organisational support. That's a really good question, and I think that is going to be it's going to be a learning experience for us. I suspect maybe what we think at the moment is using this blended approach. So rather than it being an organisation support, the way that traditional model of you go to X charity and X digital champion helps you. If there was digital inclusion hubs, so like for example in Berwickshire, they're talking about, and they've got some hubs in village halls. It's more about maybe going in to get like maybe one-to-one support or remote support, and it can be maybe around the lines of, rather than it being that, you know, like a digital skills training course, you can literally go in with an iPad and say, can you show me how to do X on this? Or you could book a one-to-one call remotely. So it's more of it feels slightly more like I don't want to say tech support, but I can't think of a better phrase. So it's rather than going straight to that organisation and feeling like I am engaging with this mental health organisation to get digital champion support, it's more of I've just gone straight for that. So hopefully having maybe what we're hoping to achieve with the digital inclusion pilot will bring some of that blended approach in, and we'll maybe see people who traditionally wouldn't have engaged with that type of support approaching us, but it is watch this space. That's a lot of this is at the moment. It's trial and error, so we'll be letting you know how it goes in a lot of cases. And let me just see, Dave. Yes. So is the support more aimed at organisations who haven't started using a place-based approach, or could it also help those who are already some of the way down the road? For full disclosure, I know, Dave, and I know why you're asking me. Yes, if you're slightly further down the road and you wanted support, yes, 100%. That's why we're asking for this kind of expression of interest form, so that you can let us know what is your place, what are you thinking, what's the type of thing you're trying to solve, you know, so what is your problem, who are your potential partners, your collaborators, etc. So yes. And also, yes, Gavin, there is further education Connecting Scotland stuff still available at the moment. There is a link that we can pop onto this for you. Now let me just see. Yes, Dave, it was a loaded question, I got that. And Mike, let's see, with the move to digital by default, how do we ensure that those who are digitally excluded do not become even more so, but also potentially lose access to other services? It's a minefield. Yes, it is. It absolutely is. I think, again, learning process, but I think what we're hoping with this place-based approach is, if we're able to harness the assets that already exist, it should free up capacity to try and engage more with those people that are excluded. So rather than moving everything online, it's having the people that are already engaging online, it's empowering them and making them more confident so they move further along that journey, which then leaves the people who are frontline staff supporting offline people, if that kind of makes sense, as the thought, but I suppose we'll see if it happens. Aaron, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, it was just to come in on that, follow up on the question from Mike. I don't know if you've seen, but the Alliance have some work they've been doing around a human rights based approach to digital inclusion and digital health and social care. And it's worth having a look at theirs. I was on a panel yesterday with Carmen from the Alliance, who's their digital lead. And we had a similar question, and she talked about how, you know, when public services have a digital offering, it's important to apply a human rights lens where you can't incentivize a digital option over an in-face option, because you create inequality and discrimination, whereby if someone's willing to take a digital option, they might get seen within 1 week, but a physical face-to-face appointment is 3, 4, 5 weeks. And that creates discrimination and inequality, because those that can't access the digital route then face discrimination. So there's a really interesting, they've done a lot of work around human rights-based approaches to digital health and social care. So I would say it's a good place to do some reading as well on that.
Shona?
Yeah, just kind of backing up what you and Aaron are saying there, Claire, how important the digital champion model is for that reason, because we know people aren't online, but we also know that they're more likely to go online if it's through a trusted intermediary. So we know if they're getting a support through, whether it's a mental health service or a care service, if we can get those frontline staff to support them with digital, we know that's what works. So yeah, we know there's a lot of people offline, but approaching them just to get them online doesn't work. But using that digital champion model of embedding them through all the services, so hopefully all that frontline services then have the confidence to support that individual to get online, is definitely a model that we see work. But yeah, there's still so much work to be done, I guess, in that. But we know the digital champion model works, and yeah, just like you guys are saying, it definitely is a positive model to embed.
Yeah, no, definitely, I totally agree. There's no more questions in the chat box. Does anyone have a question in the old-fashioned way of hand up or shout out? I think we might be done. Okay, so just to reiterate then, and we'll give you 10 minutes of your time back unless any last minute questions come in. Well, as I said, we're going to send out the interim report, which goes into this in a lot more detail because it's such a huge topic. So we'll send all that out to everyone. Feel free to share it within your organisations, as Gavin said, if you feel this would be valuable to your organisation, but it needs to be seen by other people, please absolutely share it. We will put this recording on the SDvul YouTube channel. We'll put a link to the email that goes out as well, and we will put the expression of interest form there as well. However, if anyone wants a wee bit more information, questions, etc., it's myself and my colleague Jason. Our contact details will be in the email, but they're also on that interim report as well. They're on the last page if you're looking for it. And I think if that's us. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much everyone for coming along. It was really nice to see so many people are interested in this, and hopefully as we go forward there'll be more opportunities for us all to collaborate and do things. Like, I love the idea of thinking about what a shared framework or a metric would be. So I think we're in a good position in Scotland to try and do something fairly innovative, so we'll see how we go. Brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone.